Star Wars has this very specific canon now and a very specific timeline. And it seems like there's some movies and books where there's wiggle room to have characters interact in between. How did you guys settle on exactly the time period where you wanted this game to take place?
That's the biggest thing with Star Wars, is coming up with the timeline.
Right.
And then you can start having conversations about, well, what can we play with in this timeline? But arriving on it, it was just a lot of conversations back and forth. I mean, we knew that we wanted to make a game about a Force user. First, we just called it a Force user, but with lightsabers and Force powers. We talked about a lot of different time periods, and I think we both kind of arrived at this time period separately, but at the same time, through conversations just between me and other members of my team and Lucasfilm.
Right. Yeah, no, I really dig it because it's sort of like, it not only bridges essentially two trilogies, but it's also bridges a lot of kind of generational dispute that happens within the Star Wars community in general.
When you talk about the prequels, there's just this incredibly rich lore and backstory, and the original trilogy is more about kind of spirit,
yeah,
and feeling, and like there's like a magic to it. It's one of those things, while you're building it over years, you just kind of point. You'll notice things that you're doing in the game, and you'll be able to point to different moments of those time periods that just fit nicely into those spaces. Sometimes it was based on, hey, we've seen this in this certain film, or we've seen it in one of these TV shows, and it's like, we want to try to lift this from that and make it work in this game. And that's all dependent on, well, would you actually see this creature on this planet or this location? So there was always somewhat of a debate there. Other times there were gaps that we couldn't find within Star Wars, and then it was more kind of figuring out what we needed from a design standpoint, what type of character it is in more of a very kind of generic, general sense, and then working with Lucasfilm to figure out how to create something that really belonged in Star Wars, based on the rules that we defined for that AI.
You can't stop the Empire!
I can stop you.
I think that like one of the cool things about talking about this game with other people is that almost everyone I know is playing it on a different difficulty level.
Right.
And like 2019 is a year where we collectively as industry had this massive, drawn out, occasionally bloody, violent debate about video game difficulty settings and whether or not they should be, whether they shouldn't be, whether they're encroaching on the artistic vision of a publisher or a studio. And you guys just kind of quietly came out and you're like, well, we have a video game with some Souls-inspired elements, and we have difficulty settings, and you guys didn't really like scream from the rafters about it. How did you guys land on that, and sort of what is your stance on the difficulty debate in video games?
For a long time, we just had 3 levels, and that worked well for the team, because we're all pretty good at games in general. Mm-hmm. Once we started playtesting more and more, we started to find out, well, I mean, it's obvious, this is Star Wars. We're casting a very wide net. There's a huge group of fans out there that some of them aren't gonna want difficulty at all.
Right.
And that's when we added in the story mode at the end. And we got to see then results of these playtests, the numbers started going up because we weren't leaving anybody out. If you're a kid and you want to play the game and you don't have the same experience as like some expert gamer, you should be able to just jump in there and start swinging a lightsaber and feeling that power fantasy.
Yeah, which is awesome, because I mean, I think that what's cool about, I mean, Star Wars is primarily a movie series, and like movies happen no matter what you do, right? They don't push back, they don't kill you.
Right.
They don't knock you in a cliff or anything like that. You know, nobody gets on a scene on a DVD unless it skips, and they're like, I can't get any further than this. And so that's really cool to sort of give people the opportunity to experience a Star Wars story no matter what level they're at.
Yeah, and it's still not completely passive. I mean, you're engaged.
Yeah.
This is really more of a combat thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, the platforming that we have in the game and the puzzles and everything, they don't get any easier. I think the first thing that you have to get right is the intro. And this is something that we went back and forth. Lucasfilm was very particular on, but like the first time the player sees Darth Vader, what it sounds like,
right?
Him approaching, what it looks like, what's the camera angle, what's the lighting, that's all gotta be right just to set the impression. After that, is really coming to terms that you've played this whole game, you're not even close to his level, and he's just a wrecking machine. So we had to come up with gameplay that supported that made the player like, put the fear of God in the player.
You cannot escape.
We talked about, not only Darth Vader, but like Michael Myers. It's like you don't want to go anywhere near this guy. So understanding that you're not on the same level and setting up all those shots that he's doing things that puts that emotion in you that there's no chance to fight back, then I think at that point you've kind of nailed Darth Vader.
Having him burst onto the scene like that and sort of become this like unkillable boss fight was really interesting to me because, like I said, this is a power fantasy about becoming a Jedi, and part of my brain was like, I can take him.
That was one of the most rewarding things for us when we started to play test this and seeing the reaction on players' faces.
Yep.
When Darth Vader walked in, like nobody was expecting it.
No.
And that's exactly what we wanted, and incredibly rewarding.
The lightsaber customization of the game turned out to be something that I spent way more time in than I ever had any idea I would, to the point where I'm kicking myself for not getting a custom lightsaber when I went to Disneyland.
The lightsaber, a lot of the customization, ponchos, seeds, skins, that stuff came in really late.
Really?
And we were just trying to figure out the game and how the whole game fit together. And when we first got it put together, it was clear we need something for the player to go out and hunt for, and to reward the player for beyond just the skills that you're getting that are unlocking the different planets and the Metroidvania style that we have for the game. And lightsaber was right on the top of the list. But how do you present it? It shows up on the screen as maybe 20 pixels or something like that.
Exactly.
It's like you got to let the player get up close and personal to it. We got to have. That's when we started talking about workbenches and having this special mode where you can swap out different pieces. As soon as we brought that up with Lucasfilm, it was something that they were totally into and they totally encouraged, and they could see why people were going to like this. And then they offered, hey, we're doing this thing at Galaxy's Edge, and it was actually really helpful because they had a bunch of 3D models of pieces that we could already take and repurpose through our engine and get, the whole system stood up.
Right, and the build up to that is really powerful too. It's one of those things like we know it's there. The player knows it's there. Like when I made mine like really shiny gold, it's like, okay, that's popping. I can actually see that's happening there. But there's a lot of subtle changes that just sort of exist as the character's running around and like, but it's there.
Yep.
And that's like the important.
That's all that matters.
When you're working with the story group and with Lucasfilm in general, can you go like, do you guys have a ATST we can scan, or do you have, like, how does all that come? Do they have an archive, a library that you can go in and take pictures of?
Yeah, there's a huge library with stuff from Lucasfilm and ILM where we can pull from. It's not ready for our engine,
right.
So there's a lot of work that has to go into repurposing the models and making it sure that it displays right in our game and it's performant enough so that it's optimized for what we're doing. But I mean, I would be lying if I didn't say we made decisions on the game, production decisions on the game based on, hey, we know we can get this model. We're going to get that in the game 2 months faster than if we design something from scratch through concept art and then building it all the way up through modeling. And ATST is a very good example of that.
Did you guys have any sort of rules in terms of working with the story group? Like when Cal force pushes somebody, this is how far they can go? Or like, did it get very specific with stuff like that?
There wasn't any like hard and fast rules. It was more kind of a feeling that we've maybe gone too far. Mm-hmm. But I think for that example, I mean, everybody wanted the game to be pretty grounded.
Right.
And we tried to make sure that like there was weight to everything that we were doing, but there certainly was nothing in regards to metrics other than, hey guys, this isn't feeling right. Let's have a discussion about it, or maybe these are just some suggestions on things that you could adjust. But at the end of the day, it always came back to us to make those adjustments.
Are you interested? I mean, I know you are, but you're interested in telling more Star Wars stories, as your career goes on.
Who wouldn't want to be?
Of course, right? I mean, especially now that you're making something that's canon. Are you kind of married to this time period? Or are you ever thinking about ideas in other parts around the timeline? I
mean, I love this time period, but it's pretty hard with everything that's going on with Star Wars,
right?
And everywhere you see it. To not think about other time periods as well,
of
and
course,
places to go and those types of things.